Welcome to the channel, your go-to source for MMA news, breakdowns, and fight analysis. Let's get straight into it. MMA has never been just a sport. It's a spectacle of heart, skill, and pure unpredictability. We've witnessed shocking knockouts, intense rivalries, and moments that shook the MMA world to its core. But the history of this sport runs deep, and here are some of the more legendary moments that changed everything. From fights that saved the UFC to upsets that no one saw coming, we're diving into more of the greatest MMA moments that made history and why they'll never be forgotten. November 12th, 1993. The world was introduced to something completely different. The first ever UFC event promised to answer the age-old question: which fighting style is the most effective? Would it be boxing, karate, wrestling, or something else entirely? The event was filled with powerhouse strikers and intimidating brawlers, but one man shocked everyone: Royce Gracie. A skinny, unassuming Brazilian, Gracie wasn't the biggest, strongest, or fastest fighter in the tournament. But what he had was an art almost no one in America had seen before: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. One by one, Gracie submitted his opponents with ease. It didn't matter how big they were. Once he took them down, it was over. That night, MMA was changed forever. Fighters realized that technique could defeat raw power, and the sport started evolving into what we see today. This was the night modern MMA was born. Back in 2005, the UFC was struggling. MMA was still seen as a brutal, niche sport, and many believed the UFC was on the verge of going out of business. The organization needed something special, something that would capture the attention of mainstream sports fans. Enter The Ultimate Fighter, a reality TV show designed to introduce the world to MMA. The show had been building momentum, but it all came down to one night: The Ultimate Fighter Season 1 finale. The main event? Forrest Griffin versus Stephan Bonnar in the light heavyweight tournament final. The winner would earn a UFC contract, but what no one realized was that this fight would become something much bigger than just a competition. As soon as the fight started, it was clear this was going to be a war. Both men stood toe-to-toe, trading punches with reckless abandon. Neither backed down. Every time one of them landed a big shot, the other came right back with one of his own. The energy in the arena was electric. By the second round, the crowd was on its feet. Dana White and the UFC executives watching backstage knew something special was happening. By the third round, it was absolute chaos. Both Griffin and Bonnar were bloodied, exhausted, and barely able to stand, but neither stopped swinging. When the final bell rang, the entire crowd erupted in applause. Commentator Joe Rogan summed it up perfectly: "That was one of the best fights I've ever seen in my life." Forrest Griffin won by unanimous decision, but the fight was so incredible that Dana White gave both fighters contracts on the spot. But the real victory? The UFC itself. The fight was broadcast live on free TV, and millions of people tuned in, many of them watching MMA for the first time. The fight was so exciting, so raw, and so intense that it turned casual viewers into lifelong fans. After that night, the UFC's popularity exploded. Pay-per-view sales skyrocketed, new fans flooded in, and MMA went from being an underground sport to a global phenomenon. Many believe that without this fight, the UFC wouldn't exist as it does today. It wasn't just a great fight, it was the fight that saved the UFC. By 2015, Ronda Rousey was the biggest female star in combat sports. She wasn't just winning fights, she was destroying her opponents. Nearly every fight ended in the first round, most of them by her signature armbar. Her opponent at UFC 184, Kat Zingano, was no ordinary challenger. She was undefeated, aggressive, and known for her toughness. Many believed she would be Rousey's biggest test yet. But instead of a war, the fight became one of the quickest finishes in UFC history. As soon as the fight started, Zingano sprinted across the octagon, launching a flying knee at Rousey. She was looking to overwhelm the champion early. But Rousey was ready. She sidestepped, grabbed Zingano in midair, and flipped her onto the mat in one seamless motion. Within seconds, Rousey transitioned into her patented armbar. Before Zingano even realized what had happened, her arm was trapped, hyperextended, and she had no choice but to tap. 14 seconds. It was the fastest submission in UFC title fight history, and another dominant statement from Rousey. At this point, people weren't just watching Rousey to see if she would win. They were watching to see how fast she would finish. Her dominance was so overwhelming that some wondered if anyone in the division could ever stop her. While Rousey's reign would eventually come to an end, This moment remains one of the most jaw-dropping finishes in UFC history, proof that she was a once-in-a-generation talent. Anderson Silva's front kick KO versus Vitor Belfort, 2011. By 2011, Anderson Silva was already regarded as the most dominant champion in UFC history. He had defended his middleweight title 7 times and seemed untouchable inside the octagon. His opponent at UFC 126, Vitor Belfort, was one of the most dangerous strikers in the sport. Known for his blazing fast hands and knockout power, Belfort was expected to be Silva's toughest test yet. Tension was high before the fight. The two had been former training partners, but now stood on opposite sides, with Belfort determined to take Silva's belt. When the fight began, both men were cautious, feeling each other out. Then, in the blink of an eye, Silva unleashed one of the most legendary knockouts in MMA history. With almost no telegraphing, Silva threw a perfectly placed front kick straight to Belfort's face. The kick landed clean. Belfort's head snapped back, his body froze for a split second. Then he collapsed to the mat. It was martial arts perfection. Joe Rogan, calling the fight, could only yell, "He front kicked him in the face." The crowd erupted. Silva followed up with a couple of punches, but the fight was already over. Afterward, when asked about the kick, Silva simply smiled and said it was a move taught to him by Steven Seagal. Whether that was true or just mind games, nobody knows. This knockout became an iconic moment in MMA history. It was the first time a front kick knockout had been seen at such a high level, and it cemented Silva's reputation as one of the most creative and devastating strikers ever. Even today, when people talk about the most beautiful knockouts in UFC history, Silva's front kick is always near the top of the list. For nearly a decade, Jose Aldo was the king of the featherweight division. He was the only UFC featherweight champion in history, holding an undefeated record in the promotion and tearing through every challenger that stood in his way. His leg kicks were brutal, his striking was precise, and his takedown defense was nearly impenetrable. Enter Conor McGregor. McGregor was unlike any fighter the UFC had ever seen. He wasn't just winning fights, he was calling his shots, predicting knockouts, and captivating the world with his brash personality. He promised to dethrone Aldo, and the build-up to the fight was one of the most intense in MMA history. For months, McGregor verbally tormented Aldo. He stole his belt at press conferences, mocked his English, and got inside his head in a way no one else had before. Aldo, usually composed, was visibly frustrated. The fight was originally scheduled for UFC 189, but Aldo pulled out due to injury. When they finally met at UFC 194, the anticipation was off the charts. This was the biggest featherweight fight of all time. And then, it was over in an instant. The moment the fight started, Aldo charged forward, looking to land a big shot. But McGregor was waiting for him. As Aldo lunged in, McGregor threw a perfect left-hand counter that landed flush on Aldo's chin. Aldo was unconscious before he even hit the mat. 13 seconds. It was the fastest knockout in UFC title fight history, and one of the most shocking moments the sport had ever seen. The undefeated king had been dethroned in seconds. McGregor didn't just take Aldo's belt, he took his aura of invincibility. In the post-fight interview, McGregor famously said, "No one can take that left-hand shot." The knockout cemented McGregor's place as the biggest star in MMA history. It wasn't just a win, it was the moment that defined an era. What do you guys think? Let us know below. If you like this video, then you may like what YouTube is suggesting right now. Stay tuned for more MMA breakdowns, fight analysis, and latest MMA news, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Thanks for watching.